Hello there, guys. Welcome to Paper Phenomenon. I'm Kathy King, and we're going to get started on a project. But before we get started, perhaps this is your first time or you want to refresh your course before you begin the project. So when you pick up one of my projects, you get a cutting guide. Doesn't look like this. This is super simple. This is a practice cutting guide. I'm going to go through the process of prepping. So when you start a project, you want to prep, all right? So prepping for your project consists of three things: cutting, scoring, and taping. And that's what we're going to, this is what this video is about. However, I thought it would be fun to create a little project while we're prepping, and you just have something to practice with going forward. All right, so you have for this practice project and this prepping little tutorial, you have pieces A, B, C, and D. I'm going to take you through my process, and then perhaps you can adapt your own process along the way. My process may not be your process. However, you do want to cut, score, and tape before you start any of my projects. All right, so we're going to start with cutting. Cutting guide says pages, cardstock, piece A. Cut one piece at 4.5 by 6.5. Let's do it. 4.5 by 6.5. Oh, that's 6 3/4 inches. My bad. No, right here. Sometimes this trimmer confuses me. 6.5. Perfect. Right here. 6.5. So this is piece A. You're going to grab a pencil and you're going to write A. Now, after piece A, there is no scoring. However, the rest of the pieces have scoring marks. I do not cut and score. I cut all my pieces, I label, then I score. So to keep track, I cut piece A, I do just this mark right here. All right, across. So A goes to the side. Now I move on to piece B. Piece B says 6.5 by 5 1/8 of an inch. So I'm going to cut at 5 1/8 of an inch because it's my shortest measurement. And then 6.5. Right there. Now piece B, so we do B. It says to score on the 5 1/8 inch side at 1/2 inch and 5/8 of an inch. I'm not going to score yet. I just like to cut. I don't like to be between machines. Okay. So now piece C, it says cut 2.5 by 7.5, and this is exactly 7.5 inches because I cut on the smallest side first and then did the 6.5 inch. Okay, so just a little technique for you guys there. And this is actually slightly under. What a bummer. This is slightly under 7.5 inches, so I have to grab another piece. So 2.5 by 7.5. 1/8 of an inch makes a difference, my friends. So 2.5 by 7.5. All right, and this is my piece C. Oops, I forgot to cross that out. So now piece C, cross it out. C. And now D. D says 4 1/4 by 3 1/4. Again, I tend to cut on the smallest measurement first, and then the other one. All right, and then D, cross out. Done. So now I have these bits, right? Scraps. And now I'm going to score. Now I can just move everything out, move the trimmer out of the way and score. So now I grab my pieces again. A has no score lines. Done. Move to the side. B says score on the 5 1/8 inch side at 1/2 inch and then again at 5/8 of an inch. So let's do it. 1/2 inch. I place my paper on my scoreboard flush to this lip here, then 1/2 inch, then 1/8 of an inch again. So I have 2 score lines. See that? When you score, you have a dented side and you have a bumpy side of the score line. You can see it and you can feel it. There's a dent there. There's a bump here. Important to note. So once you score, I then make an X, right? So I X over the A because I'm done with it. B, I X'd over it. Now I'm on to C. So now I know that I cut and scored those 2 pieces. C says score on the 2.5 inch side at a 1/2 inch, and then over onto the 7.5 inch side at 1/2 inch, and then 7 again. And I just like to flip it over and do this. I don't necessarily like to score like this on the 7-inch side. And the reason for that is if you cut slightly shorter and I scored on the 7-inch side, I may screw up my piece. But if I go flip it over, or slightly larger, if I flip it over, I get a little bit more room. And I know that just probably confused the heck out of you, and you'll learn this as you go along. You'll learn, get a feel for your cutting and your scoring. So if it's your first project, just do what the cutting guide says. All right, just you want to try to make sure that your pieces are cut exactly to the measurement. And if it's not, this is why you have practice, right? You get this little practice project. Cross out C, done. D says score on the 3 3/4 inch side at a 1/2 inch. Done. Now, another thing I want to say is that you always, with my projects, you always want to follow my cutting guide. I hardly ever call out measurements because sometimes I say the wrong thing. Your cutting guide is king. What this says is what you cut, okay? There you go. So now we've went through cutting, check. We scored, check. Now we tape. All right. So now we put that away. To tape. To tape. You want to tape. Tape goes parallel to a score line. A doesn't have a score line, so that means it doesn't get taped. B has a score line. C has a score line. D has a score line. These get taped. How do you tape? Your cutting guide will tell you. Your tape always goes on the dented side of the score line unless instructed otherwise on the cutting guide. So B says tape on the bumpy side. C says nothing. So where does that tape go? Dented side. D says tape on the bumpy side, so it goes on the bumpy side. If there is nothing next to the letter, that means it goes on the dented side. All right? That's it. Very simple. So B gets tape on the bumpy side. So I'm going to look for the bumpy side. I'm going to grab my tape. I prefer to use 3/8 inch tape of Maker Basics tape. This is a tape in my shop. I highly encourage you to give it a try. I have 2 sizes, 3/8 inch and slightly under 1/4 inch. All right, and that's just in case you have to do something on 1/4 inch, is slightly under so it doesn't go over. All right, so those 2 sizes is what I have available in my shop. So Maker Basics 3/8 inch is what I prefer. Now, B, tape on the bumpy side. So the rule is parallel to the score line, closest to the cut edge. So here's my score line, closest to the cut edge. You want to line up your tape with the cut edge without going over. Don't go over, right along the edge. And then bring it on down. Now you want to cut this. You can cut it with your hand. I personally don't like doing that. I like to cut with a straight edge. And the straight edge that I prefer, and I'll tell you in a minute, you want to bring it right to the edge, pull the tape and cut. I love this tool. This is not for cutting tape. This is a mitering tool, so it has double duty, my friends. It's by Darlene by Heart. That's the name of her shop on Etsy. I have 0 affiliation. We are just fellow crafters. I bought the tool and I love it, and I share what I love with you guys here on this channel. Darlene by Heart. If you don't own one, you may want to try it out. However, you can try any straight edge, right? Any straight edge, or you can just look, boop, grab your scissors and cut. I've just developed my techniques already. This is what I prefer. All right, so there you go. Done. Tape. C. It says nothing. So where does the tape go? Tape on the dented side of the score line. C has 3 score lines. When you see 3 score lines like this in this U formation, that is 9 times out of 10 a pocket. All right, unless I get super fancy and I'm taking you down a rabbit hole. But 3 score lines in this U formation is a pocket normally. All right, so rule is tape parallel to the score line closest to the cut edge. You want to tape it up, my friends. Grab your tool. So I start on the short side, then I work my way over, parallel to the score line, closest to the cut edge. And if this is your first time, it may not go as smooth for you as it is for me. I've been doing this a long time. All right. Now, you can aim for perfection. It doesn't mean you're always going to get it, but you always want to aim for it. So closest to the cut edge without going over. You never, ever, ever want to go over the cut edge. That would be called tape overhang. Not good. You cut that off. You never want your tape hanging over. There you go. You prepped. You just prepped the pocket. Tape in a U formation. Done. D. Final piece. What does D say? Tape on the bumpy side. Well, look at that. Let's look for the bumpy side. Tape on the bumpy side. Parallel to the score line. Closest to the cut edge. Boom, boom. And done. We have prepped for our project. This is it. When you're going to make one of my projects, you prep just like this. You keep your letters in order. A, B, C, and D. Done. We've prepped. Now you watch the first video. You're ready for your project. But I'm not going to leave you hanging. Let's assemble this. So there are 2 techniques that I use when we assemble projects that I use over and over. We use more, but these are the main ones. So I'm going to go over them here so that when we start the process, you already know them and you're just going through the motions. All right. So the techniques are either a mini taper or a miter. We fold, we burnish, and then we assemble. All right. So for A, you're not going to see anything on your cutting guide because this is when I go through the process with you in the process videos. All right. So when you're watching the videos, we're going to assemble the project. A, nothing. B is a flap. On a flap, we either mini taper or we don't. For B, I'm going to say we're going to mini taper. What is a mini taper? A mini taper is cutting on the corners, on an angle. But for my projects, we do a mini taper. And what does that mean? We're just going to snip off. I know that looks like a lot, but it's just about 1/8 of an inch. Right on that corner, just get rid of that corner. That's a mini taper right there. About 1/8 of an inch in and cut. Right there. That's it. That's a mini taper. We're done. C is a pocket, right? Why is it a pocket? Because it has tape in this U formation. A pocket, we get a little fancy with the technique. It's called a mitering technique. You want to flip it over and look for the intersecting score lines, right? Where are those intersecting score lines? Right here, where the score lines intersect and they form this X. You'll see an X on both sides of the cardstock. You're going to miter. How do you miter? You position your scissors directly across the X and you cut. You're going to do that on both sides. All right, I'm going to show you if you miter incorrectly. To miter incorrectly is to either miter too far into the X or too far into the pocket, right, this way, or that way, out to the edge. So I'm going to go out to the edge. I'm not going to go directly across the X, and I'm going to show you. Gosh, I think I still got that pretty perfect. So hopefully I got this one wrong and this one right. So to miter properly, now you're going to fold. See this? See how my flaps don't overlap? That is a perfect miter. Oh, I did it wrong. See this? My flaps are touching. That is not a perfect miter. So what you want to do is open it up and you want to go directly, you want to aim for directly across the X. And voila, that's a perfect miter. When you go too far in, you're going to see that you don't have a point, that you have like a squared off edge, okay? Not like an angle on the point instead of a point. All right, so now that we have that, D gets nothing. All right, no mini taper, no nothing, and I'll explain to you why we're not mini tapering on this flap. Normally a flap, you mini taper or you don't, and I'll tell you why. So now, to assemble, let's do it, guys. All right, and again, I can't stress this enough. We do this in the process videos, all right? Now, the prepping is what I want you to take away from this lesson. So A, easy peasy, gets nothing. B, we're going to fold. Next step is fold, burnish. You fold on the score line. This one has 2 score lines, right? So you're going to fold on both those score lines, and you're going to burnish on both those score lines. Careful, because it's an 1/8 inch gusset. You could definitely crush your gusset, so be very, very careful. See that? So fold and burnish. Put it to the side. C. Yep, C, fold. Flaps on your desk and burnish. All right. There it is. Perfect mitering. My flaps are not overlapping. D, fold. How do you fold, right? I missed that. Sorry. I assumed that you guys knew this. Forgive me. You fold to the bumpy side of the score line. So you want to fold. Here's the bumpy side. So you fold to the bumpy side, right? There you go. Whether your tape is on the bumpy side or the dented side, proper folding technique on a score line is to fold to the bump. And that's what I did here. All right, so I fold it to the bumpy side. Notice you cannot see my tape when the flap is engaged, right? When the flap is in the folded position. All right, when the flap is on the dented side and you fold and burnish, you see the tape, okay? When, again, when the flap is on the bumpy side of the score line, you do not see the tape when the flap is in the folded position, or like I like to say, engaged. All right, so this one has a gusset, B. D does not have a gusset, pocket, nothing. So we're going to assemble. Again, it's as easy as A, B, C, and in this case, D. All right, let's get to it. So we're going to start with A. There's A. Let's grab our B piece. For B, we did a mini taper, right? When tape is on the bumpy side, you want to position your piece behind something, not on top. You position it on top when tape is on the dented side. So because this tape is on the bumpy side, we're going to position it underneath A. Now we did a mini taper here on this flap as opposed to this flap, no mini taper, because this flap goes from end to end and you don't want those corners poking out when you mat. So that's why you mini taper. We did a mini taper here because this is going to float. And when we mat, we'll cover this flap. All right. So that's when you mini taper. You mini taper when it goes from end to end. If it's floating, no mini taper. Now to attach A onto B properly, you want to attach it parallel to the score line. The very first one, you don't want to go over the gusset without going over the score line. All right, so you want to leave a little bit of space between the score line. A little bit of space. Make sure you have no tape overhang between the score line and the cut edge of A. Okay, and it's kind of hard to see on the black paper, but you'll get it. So if I fold back on that very first score line, you're going to see that, and there it is. See how there's a little bit of space between the score line and the cut edge of A? That's what you're looking for. Now, if I flip it over, you'll see the gusset and then that back side. If I open it, you probably, oh, you can. There's a little bit of space there. Not the gusset. I'm talking about a little bit of space between A and that very first score line. All right, So that's how you want to attach it. Now C. C is going to go right onto A. So you're going to overlap it to A. So that means right on the edge of A, you will attach C. All right, so that means you are slightly away from that score line because you're attaching it to A. So let's remove the tape backing. Okay, right there. From end to end, right on top of A. You no longer want to see A because you're attaching C right on top of A. So C now becomes the edge, right? So now we have C edge and then A edge on this side. And when you fold, you should have a perfect fold with zero obstruction because you attached A and C slightly away from the score line. Okay, so that is pretty perfect. And now D, tape is on the bumpy side, so it goes behind. If tape was on the dented side, it would go right on top. But in this case, we're going to go behind. No need for that mini taper because it's going to float in the middle. All right, my friends, so you want to attach this slightly away from the score line. Again. All right, and there you go. We made a little project and you learned how to prep your pieces for the project that you purchase. So grab that purchase cutting guide and get to work with prepping, and I'll see you in the next video. What are you going to do with this? Whatever you want. You can make as many as you want to practice if you'd like, or you can use these to put them in a project. All right, my friends, check out the next video. Let's get started.